Everyone's got a tank, and ours is more full, I think, than the other team. Sprint-based football obviously allows you to be faster, play faster, but we're able to play more violent, I think, on a Friday because of our approach. And so, if anything, we're wearing out the other team in the first half. And so we're probably better conditioned in the second half of games than the teams we line up against. And I think it's twofold. Our guys aren't tired, and then because of the feed the cats approach, right, and the culture and the experience that we create for our kids and our program, they care so much more deeply about their teammates and what they're doing.
Welcome to this episode of Sprint-Based Football, presented by Titan GPS. Founded and based in Texas, Titan GPS is your key to sprint-based football success. Designed specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter, like top speed, explosive acceleration, and even the powerful truck stick, speed times weight, for the ultimate performance insight. Whether it's optimizing practice, spotlighting players with 3D highlights, or giving recruiters verified in-game stats, Titan delivers. And with no minimums to get started, Titan walks you through every step. Message them on X @TitanSensor to learn more. Titan GPS, performance measured, potential unlocked. Today, we're really excited to have Garrett Mueller on the Sprint-Based Football podcast. Garrett has won 2 consecutive state championships at Stewartville, Minnesota, and that win streak is now at 28 consecutive games, and he might do this sprint-based football thing better than anybody I know. Hey, we're at EP 3 now, EP 3 of the Sprint-Based Football podcast, and I'm here with a good friend, Garrett Mueller. I call him Garrett Mueller over and over again. We were just talking, I think that's the Illinois pronunciation, and he goes by the Minnesota pronunciation, which is Mueller. So, Garrett, glad to have you.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so my dad always taught me it's Mueller like color. So that's the easy way to, if you have to keep that in your head to remember it. So that's why I always tell people. But no, thanks for having me on, Tony. This is awesome that you got to start the Sprint-Based Football podcast, because I think when we talked at TFC, just how much the movement's growing, I still think it's a fraction of what it should be and what's out there. But there are so many programs now that have implemented it and coaches that have implemented it with a lot of success. And so I'm excited to hear all the different stories from around the country of programs and coaches that are finding their way, their version of it to find success with their programs. So happy to be on here with you and to kick off the new podcast.
I like to sometimes describe something by saying what it is not. And the best way I describe it is that sprint-based football is new school. I was talking to Keith, and I said 10 years from now, everyone is going to be doing sprint-based football. And he said, no, it's going to be 3 to 5 years. Everybody's going to be doing sprint-based football. So were you ever old school? I knew you were a coach's kid, so at least you were aware of traditional football.
Yeah.
Were you ever old school?
I think I'm rooted in old school. The program that I grew up in Menominee, Wisconsin, one of the winningest programs in state history. They won 5 state championships through the 90s. We won one my senior year in 2002. And I would say that was a very traditionalist, old school mentality. And I think you mentioned it with Brad and what you always say, dumb beats dumber. And there was a lot of great things that we did in our program, from learning how to work hard and do things the right way and get stronger and execute and things like that. So there were a lot of good things we were doing to win football games. And so just being rooted, coming up through that, and then my dad being a head coach for 30 plus years, I think he did things a little differently maybe, or was always kind of had that growth mindset and looking for different or new ways to do things in his program. So I probably get that a little bit more from him, just looking for new, better ways to implement things with your program to be successful and win. But I would say from a sprint-based football approach, we're very different now than what we were when I first started as an assistant at Stewartville, or even my first year as a head coach in 2018. We made that shift after my first year going into 2019, and it's been nothing but an upward trend ever since.
So you talk about that shift. Are your practices shorter?
Practices are shorter.
Less hitting?
Less hitting, significantly.
Your kids?
No conditioning ever.
Ever. Do you find that sometimes there's a cost to pay for that? Like, do you find that in the fourth quarter that other teams seem to have more juice than you do?
No, not at all. And I would say it's maybe because we're fresher to start the game, right? Everyone's got a tank, and ours is more full, I think, than the other team. And sprint-based football obviously allows you to be faster, play faster, but we're able to play more violent, I think, on a Friday because of our approach. And so, if anything, we're wearing out the other team in the first half. And so we're probably better conditioned in the second half of games than the teams we line up against.
Isn't it weird that forever, like Vince Lombardi said, that fatigue makes cowards of us all? And we all agree with that. If you're really tired, you're not very tough anymore. But what coaches did was they went out and tried to wear kids out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, thinking that would pay off in the fourth quarter on Friday. And to think that you could do less and have a speed-based approach instead of doing more with an endurance-based approach, but still strangely gain endurance because you're so much faster than the other team. It's just weird, isn't it?
It is. And my first year as a head coach, we would do the 110s in the summer. We would progress that. We would start with 10 110s, and you had to do it in, like, the skill guys had to do it in 12 seconds, and then the mids and the bigs had different times. And we'd progress up to like 20 by the end of the summer. And then in season, at the end of practice, it would be maybe gassers, or we'd start on a goal line and we'd yell out a certain yard line and they had to sprint to the 20 and back to the goal line, or the 10 and back, or the 40 and back. And that was supposed to get us ready, when really, like you said, we were just wearing our guys out as the week went on. And instead, now focusing on speed, we're fresher, we're faster, healthier, certainly going into Friday night. And that's been a better translation to performance, higher performance on a Friday, and we're better able to execute and wear teams out. The first time I heard about that speed reserve idea, that blew my mind. And that was, I think, early on in our transition to sprint-based football. I'm like, yeah, it makes so much sense then when you reframe it that way. If we can raise a kid's ceiling and he can run 21, 22 miles an hour, playing the game at 16 or 17 feels a heck of a lot easier. The guys they're going up against, their ceiling is 18 or 19. And those guys are working a heck of a lot harder to keep up with us, and the game's just going to feel that much more difficult for them throughout the course of the four quarters. And so then that's where we see that separation take place when we hit a second half, because our guys just aren't having to work as hard. And not only do we start the game fast, but we end up faster by the second half.
I love the fact that you used the word violent earlier, because when I get trolled, and I do get trolled because I have opinions, and Twitter is a cesspool of trolling these days. One of the favorite words that people have for me is snowflake, and that I'm soft and I need to stick to track and field because football is a man sport and blah, blah, blah. That BS. Toxic masculinity stuff.
Yes, right.
And what I keep hearing from people who drink the Kool-Aid of sprint-based football is that you might be more violent, might be better hitters because you are healthier and faster, and maybe you love the game more.
Well, like you said, you had that in one of your presentations, right? Love is violent, right? It is, right? You will die for the things that you care about most, or you will be passionate and work hard and do everything you want to do, can do to be successful because you love what you do. And I think it's twofold. It's from a performance standpoint and a physical standpoint, because our guys are fresh and fast. They go out and play violent on a Friday, more so than they would. The fatigue makes cowards of us all, right? Our guys aren't tired, and so they're able to play faster and more violent on a Friday because of that. And then because of the feed the cats approach, right, and the culture and the experience that we create for our kids and our program, they care so much more deeply about their teammates and what they're doing. And so because it matters more to them, and because of the experience that they've had, they're going to go out and play harder for the program, for their teammates, for themselves, for everybody, because of that general feeling that they have about how much they love our time together, right? It's truly the best part of our day. And so I think it's twofold in that aspect, why we play faster and more violent on a Friday, because of the experience and because of physically they're able to.
I know that you're, and I was totally intrigued with your dad, because my dad was a coach and all that kind of stuff. But in your experience, you played at one high school, and your dad played at coached at a nearby high school. Now, you have two sons. Will they play for you?
Yes, I mean, yeah, we live here in Stewartville, so as long as the status quo holds, yes.
Now, here's my theoretical, and I've been thinking about this all day. Like your dad did, coached at Stewartville, but yet you found a really nice house in a nearby town, so your sons wouldn't have to go through the hell of playing for their dad and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
And if they were practicing for 3 hours and lifting after practice, limping home, maybe going straight to bed after practice because they were too tired to eat, that they came in to run on Saturday mornings at 7. If they got just destroyed in every film session, if they saw practice as just the hell you have to go through to get to play in a game, that wouldn't last very long, would it? I mean,
Right. Yeah, it's not sustainable. And I think that was, I don't know. I mean, to a degree, we were doing that a little bit in our program, and we were losing kids. And that was the big thing, was we weren't, the guys that could help us win football games weren't all necessarily out playing football. And if I had to watch my kids go through that experience, I think that would be hell in itself, right? To have to know what it could be and versus what their reality is. But yeah, it would just be heartbreaking to know that they wouldn't have that same experience that our kids are getting here at Stewartville.
And you talked about attracting athletes. I think that's the forgotten secret sauce of everything we're doing is we're making practice the best part of a kid's day. I don't know about you, but I'd always celebrate when practice was over on Wednesday. Like, hey, we're over the hump.
Right.
All we got's a pregame practice, and you limp off the field and all that kind of stuff. And then the game gets close and you get excited and you think you just love football and hate practice and you think that's the way it has to be, but it doesn't. At your school, you have a really good basketball program.
Yeah.
And do they play football?
Yeah, virtually all of them. Last year, so we're just kind of under the way here in the 24-25 season, but last year's team, the entire starting five were starting 5 starting football players for us on the basketball team. And they're guys that are, talk about apex predators and guys being super skilled. On top of that, they're able to go out and play basketball at a really high level. And I think that's the thing with some other sports is versus football, in a sense, more technically skilled, right? With basketball, shooting, dribbling, ball handling, that kind of stuff. Baseball, right? Pitching, throwing, or hitting, stuff like that. Football, we can teach you the outside of maybe playing quarterback and having to throw a ball. We can teach you the basic skills for you to go be successful. I think that's a great part about our approach and the way we build our athletes is now they're able to go take those skills that they have in their other sports that they play and just enhance their ability to be really good at what they do. And so we've seen success across the board, not just obviously in football, but our boys basketball teams and our wrestling team sprinted 1 day a week last year. We got this. Yeah, I know, right? That's the way out there and left. We can pull those guys in, but they're doing it again a little bit this year. And they had one of the best wrestling seasons they've had in the last decade. Our baseball team sprints. Our track team won the state championship, the True Team state championship last year. And that's 90% of those kids are football kids, and they're feeding the cats in their track program. So we're seeing it in multiple sports. Our entire athletics department has benefited from this approach now since we implemented it 6 years ago now.
Now, you don't have to call anybody out here, but there almost has to be somebody on a staff or somebody, that they just really think that this is the dumbest thing in the world, that this is not football. And I know you have the 2 state championships and 28 straight wins. That's pretty powerful. But let's say you didn't have that. Let's say you went from a terrible program to a team that was 5-4, and then you were 6-3. And people are saying, well, the reason why you lost 3 games is you're not conditioning, or you only practice for 90 minutes, or you only wear full pads once a week. Can those people be convinced?
I think it's tough, right? Because we're rooted in a belief system that no matter what you say and what kind of evidence you put in front of them, it's going to be really, really hard. And I would say starting out, there was probably a degree of that in the Stewartville community. We had some talented players those first couple of years, and there were probably a good handful of people that attributed our success to the talented players that were on the field, and that's certainly the case. And we talked about sprint-based football isn't going to replace having talented players and good schemes and good coaching execution and turnovers, penalties, like all that kind of stuff. You still have to do that stuff at a high level to win football games. But it certainly brought up, right? Like you have your 4 or 5 best kids that no matter what system you put them in, they're going to be good football players, right? But then you have the meat of your roster. And I think that's where my big argument is we are pulling up the rest of our roster and have built a ton of depth. And we have guys at every position on the field that can go out and execute at a high level. And that's what's kind of put it. I think that's over time what you build with this system is, yeah, your first maybe couple of years, you go from a 1-win team to a 5-win to a conference championship to state caliber. But as you pull up the rest of that roster, that's what's going to set you apart now at the state level. Is it's not you have 4 or 5 really good football players. We got 15 to 20 dudes that can go out in the field, and we're going to be better than the team we're lined up against at a majority of the positions on the field. And so I think that's the big thing that you can't argue with, is just showing the depth of your roster over time to go and win a lot of football games.
Now, I asked Brad Dixon, and I really love talking about it. I love progression. I love talking about the bigs because it drives me crazy that the 80 to 90% of all high school football teams, the bigs, all they do is lift and eat and condition. They're just trying to gain weight. They're trying to get stronger, and their bigness is celebrated. And the thoughts out there that as long as you can take a step or two, you're okay. But just doing them such malpractice by not. Do you have any stories that you can tell about big guys that have come into your program and have become athletic? Because seldom do they ever come in as athletic big guys. If they do,
right,
they're a fullback, right?
Yeah, they're not playing offensive line if they're athletic to begin with, right? It's more the other way, like you said.
Right.
It's a big guy that maybe has a good frame or has some potential physically. And so now you got to, right, what do you go do with that? Yeah, it's the other way around. They're probably finding their way somewhere else on the field. So to use this last year as an example, our starting offensive line, we returned 2 starters from our 2023 state championship team. We had 3 other guys that were juniors the year before, and they primarily played on our JV team just because they weren't getting enough varsity reps on the offense or defensive line. We want to make sure we developed them for the following year. So we had 3 brand new starters come in. One of those kids didn't start playing football until his sophomore year of high school, but was a big kid, had an older brother that had played football, and so had a good frame, a good sized kid, but didn't move real well yet, wasn't real coordinated. But over the course of 3 years, sprinting, moving well, and developing those guys, this last year now, our starting 5 offensive linemen, we averaged, we can talk about truck stick in terms of measuring the bigs, we averaged 975 across the board with our 5 offensive linemen, and then including our tight end, which is another great story. We had 2 kids, I guess, including that group. Our tight end didn't start playing football until his junior year last year, and he just earned himself a Division II scholarship to go play tight end at Duluth because he is athletic. He's 6'6", 225. Couldn't move real well before he started with us. Was a basketball player though, so I had some agility and good hands. But now we made him a violent football player with our training and stuff like that. And so now we had the most explosive, powerful, athletic group of 6 guys up front that we've ever had, and we set a program record rushing yards this year. So I think it's just that development of guys over time. Like you said, they might be big guys, but until they can go express that strength and power on the football field, it's just potential, right? So I think that's a big thing with sprinting. What it does for our bigs is it allows them to go play fast and go play explosive on the field when it matters and it counts. When it counts, in the weight room, we can get strong, but if we can't express that strength, it doesn't matter. And so
what would you say to those people though that say that the bigs never sprint in a straight line? What track speed is not important for a kid that's 6'3", 250.
Right.
How do you convince them that speed in a straight line at max velocity is so extreme that it benefits all movement?
Well, yeah, so it goes back to sprinting, right, being the most complex, violent thing that our brain has to coordinate. And so raise the ceiling, raise the floor, right? So if we can sprint those guys and force their brain to learn how to coordinate that movement, being that explosive, anything that they do less than that is going to improve and get better, right? So we raise the ceiling, we raise the floor. So by sprinting max velocity 2 days a week, 52 weeks a year, they're going to become better accelerators. They're going to be better at managing collisions and turning on and off and winning at the point of attack, right? When the ball is snapped, you have like 0.2 seconds, right, to get off the ball and make contact. And the guy that probably contacts the other one first is going to win. And so we're able to deliver that force at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage, I think more quickly, more powerfully, and more violent than the guys we're going against, because our guys are able to coordinate sprinting max velocity, right? If we don't push the ceiling, we're going to kind of teeter in, like you say, third gear or whatever it is, and never really be able to push the envelope into improving and getting better.
Coaches, Titan GPS is the ultimate tool for football programs, including back-to-back Minnesota State champion Stewartville High School, a leader in sprint-based football. Built specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter: top speed, explosive acceleration, speed repeatability, and the game-changing truck stick. Titan's easy-to-use system delivers actionable insights at a glance, and their exceptional customer service ensures you're supported every step of the way. With built-in leaderboards to fuel competition and unmatched accountability, because the eye in the sky doesn't lie, champions trust Titan GPS, proudly made in the USA. Ready to join the best? Message them on X at Titan Sensor today to get started.
Yeah, for those people that this is foreign to, our good friend Les Spellman says that speed is global. I say that speed's the tide that lifts all boats. There's a reason why an offensive tackle that goes to the NFL Combine, who thinks he's going to be a first-round draft pick, if he runs a 5.41, he doesn't get drafted.
Right.
It doesn't get drafted.
Right.
And 5.41 would probably be the fastest offensive tackle at most high schools.
Yes, 100% it would be. And we're unique in that our guys are starting offensive line. The slowest guy was 19 miles an hour. The fact we had our right guard that can run 21. So we're unique in that sense. But if you went to any average high school, 5.440 would probably be the fastest guy on the field for.
And now, for people out there that have heard of the truck stick, we have on today's show the guy who first called the physics equation of momentum the truck stick, which is, truck stick will probably be on your tombstone someday.
Yeah, right, maybe.
Right? The inventor of the truck stick. And people be like, what the hell? I think when you first did it, you gave dog tags for 600, 700, 800?
Yes, 6, 7, and 8 were kind of our three levels, kind of like you do wristbands, right? For 18, 19, 20, 21, or up to 22 miles an hour is the same thing to try to reward those kids for hitting those benchmarks.
I probably should explain a little bit further that the truck stick is just the physics of momentum, where we take an athlete's weight in pounds and convert it to kilograms, because science is a metric thing.
Right.
And then we take their time, and it can be a Titan sensor time, or it could be also a 10-yard fly time, where if you take 20.45 divided by the time, you get miles per hour. You can change miles per hour to meters per second. So basically, if you're big and fast, you're probably going to be an awesome football player somewhere. You may not be a quarterback.
Right.
But if you're big and fast at a high school like Stewartville, you are going to be a total stud. Now, you only gave dog tags for 600, 700, 800, and you're telling me your offensive line averaged over 900?
Yeah. So we need to and so we did start to bump up. We originally had kind of those thresholds of performance for each of our position groups. And truck stick's great for the bigs, right? Because initially, when we started recording, publish all our times, right, the fastest guys are going to rise to the top of that, and the bigs are always going to be in the middle to the lower half, typically in most programs. And so how do we incentivize? Initially, it was just how do we incentivize those big guys? And then as we start to dive into it more, it's like, man, this is really probably a better measurement for what a football player has to do on the field, not just an offensive lineman, but a running back, a linebacker, wide receiver, DB, you name it, right? The bigger, faster, more explosive you are, you're going to be better able to execute whatever you have to do and probably find more success. So it was finding what are those numbers that are going to allow you to perform at a high level. And for our 600 person school, middle tier class in Minnesota to go compete at a high level and win football games, those are kind of the numbers that we found made sense for us in our program. Now you go to some giant high schools that have over 2,000 kids, because of the volume of kids that you're going to go through, right? Those numbers are going to be higher. Go to college football, you go to the NFL, right? Everything's relative and it's going to go up and up. I never would have dreamed. We talked about this, I think, on our first podcast we did back after one of the first TFCs. How many kids do we currently have? Over 800. And what would be good? If you had this many, that would be great. And I think you asked me, well, if you had like 5 or 6, that would be pretty good. And I was like, oh, that would be awesome. I think at the time we had like 4. And now going into this past season, 2024, in our program, 9 through 12, we had 20, which is wild beyond what I ever thought we would get to. But it just shows you that longitude, like over time, right? You got to build it and it takes time, but you'll get there. And we've seen it now where we've had to increase those numbers a little bit, 650, 750, 850. We kind of took it up a little bit. Are some of those big guys that are hitting over 900. We had Grayson Schneider, who was a senior finally for us this year. You asked me about him when he was a freshman because he kind of stood out a little bit. Well, he just graduated now. He's going to Montana State on a full ride scholarship. He hit 1,200 one day because he ran a 0.9 fly 10 at 255 pounds. Right. So you're going to have some freaks, and that's not going to happen very often. But we had 3 guys over 1,000 this year and a good handful over 900. So it's something that's not going to happen overnight, but it's certainly something that is going to help impact the success of your football team for sure.
Now, do you ever have somebody that's, let's say, over 900, but they suck?
Well, I don't know about suck, but probably maybe not to what, you would say, oh, this kid's over 900. He must be an amazing football player. And I'll get emails from coaches questioning the metric a little bit and the measurement because they'll go apply it to their roster for the first time. Right. And they'll get this 300-pound kid that they would maybe describe as, a little overweight or a little sloppy. And they'll say, well, this kid isn't even close to a starter for us, but he's at the top of our truck stick measurement. And yeah, maybe it's skewed a little bit to the heavier guys, but it's a number showing you what they can do. The momentum is the momentum. It's not a lie. It's what they can produce on the field. And at that point, now that's our responsibility as coaches to go give those guys the skills now to be able to produce that and apply that on the football field. So you're hiding behind an excuse if you're saying, hey, this guy's got a great truck stick number, but he's a bad football player, so that measurement doesn't work. Well, no, that's our job now as coaches to go coach them up so they can go apply it. So if you got a kid that can produce over 900, but he isn't a player, then I'd say you got to look in the mirror and find a way to be.
Or maybe that kid needs to move to Stewartville.
I'll gladly take another 900 kid and we'll figure out a way to get him coached up.
Coach him up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Coach him
now,
up.
you said that you're a good player that's going to Montana State is at 1,200, and that's absolutely amazing. I've done a lot of research with the best offensive tackles in the NFL, Tristan Wirfs, Trent Williams, Sewell. You can go through, and they're all just incredibly fast athletes that can jump high and jump far. And they probably played other sports and was a state champion wrestler like Tristan Wirfs and a state champion shot putter and discus guy like Tristan Wirfs. But those guys all have truck sticks between 1,300 and 1,400. All of them. And if you're big and slow, you're not 1,300 or 1,400. Or if you're small and fast, you're disqualified.
Then coming out for your track team, right, will be great because they'll be good in a straight line.
Yeah, there's a place for
everybody, right?
For a 165-pound wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles because he's fast and catches the ball. Right?
Yes, 100%.
I mean, if those guys get wristbands. Like, hey, I run 23, 24 miles an hour, but those dog tags, I just think that's so smart. One of the things that we've got to get to, and they're actually our title sponsor for this podcast, and that's Titan Sensors. And you have obviously influenced them a great deal because they have a truck stick now.
They have a truck stick. That was so cool. I got the email, and I didn't know, obviously, that they were going to implement that. But I get an email from Titan, since we've been using them now the last 2 years, saying, oh, we're really excited to introduce this new metric. It's called truck stick. And they're essentially explaining it to me. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't knew that would happen. And then I maybe should have trademarked it or something. But no, it's really cool that they found it meaningful enough to implement. And there are enough coaches, obviously, that find it meaningful enough to track and be able to use. So what's cool now is with that, which we could never do before, most of all of our truck stick measurements come from our sprint sessions, and using that to calculate their number. Now we can find out what they're actually doing in game and in practice, and how are they applying that potential number, whatever that peak is, when we're in a sprint session, and what does it look like now when they're actually playing football, which is really cool.
Now, so many questions about the sensors. Let's start off with, if somebody says that sounds fun, like to have GPS data and all that kind of stuff, and they say, well, how expensive is it? Talk to me about what you bought and how much it costs and how many you got and all that.
Yeah, so it's a lot more affordable, I think, than people realize, depending on the scale, right, that you want to start out with. My recommendation to coaches when they're thinking about starting up is, number one, just make sure, especially if you're going to be a sprint-based football team, make sure you have your process figured out, how you're going to implement sprint-based football first before you dive into maybe GPS or adding in some of these other things. Because like for me as the head football coach, offensive coordinator, I don't have like technology guys. I'm a bunch of other people that are helping do this stuff, right? So it's a lot to bite off early on if you're just getting started with things. You have to be able, I think you have to collect data early, but then you have to be able to apply it. That's the big thing, right? If you're just getting a GPS to like create a leaderboard for max velocity and truck stick, like that's a really cool benefit and way to emphasize those things and celebrate those guys with what they're doing. But if that's all you're using it for, that's just scratching the surface of how you can use it as a tool to help make your program and your kids better. So we started out with 8 units, and we wanted to make sure we kind of divided up between all of the different position groups, because I wanted to get information on what are our offense and defensive linemen doing.
To interrupt you though,
Yep.
The 8 units, do you pay for it per unit?
So you pay per unit, and everything is all encompassed. So you pay per unit per year.
How much is that?
I think it's about $150 a year, depending on, so there's a couple different models and levels that you can get. I think that's a good kind of the introductory. They have the new sensor that's out, new model that we just upgraded to this year. But for us, you're able to do everything with that. So the guys will put that on at the beginning of practice before any of our sprint sessions, and they'll be able to wear that throughout the entire length of all those sessions. It's a quick plug-in after practice, takes about 5 minutes with a USB, and they'll upload to the server. And then I'll instantly be able to dive into that data from that day's worth of practice. And then so you get full access to that online dashboard for a full year for each of those units, being able to monitor basically as much data as you can realistically consume and then use to apply to impact your program. So it's really a pretty, for the most part, I think, affordable way to get this really important information that you wouldn't be able to collect otherwise, to make a lot of important decisions when you look at programming and practice planning and preparing your guys for the demands of game day.
Now, I always preach that let the game be hard. The opposite of what my dad used to say, we're going to make practice hard so the games are easy. And that's the way all traditional coaches have always believed, that our practices on Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be twice as hard as a game. That's how we get tough, all that kind of stuff. So when I talk to lacrosse coaches, soccer coaches, football coaches, basketball coaches, doesn't matter. Your practice volume should never exceed 50 to 60% of game volume. But I heard you speak at TFC, and you are far more radical than that. What did you learn about your practice volumes leading to the game?
Well, and that was the cool thing, right? Because as a sprint-based football coach, we've been doing it for a couple of years, and we had to make some assumptions about how we were structuring practice and that it was preparing guys for game day. But there was a lot of things we didn't necessarily have data on in terms of the yardage and the high-speed distance and the accelerations and the decelerations and the peak velocity that our guys were hitting in practice versus what they were doing on a game day. And so once we started implementing our Titan GPS units, we were able to get all of that feedback and really see, is what we're saying we're doing actually what we're doing? Is Friday actually the hardest day of the week, right? Is Wednesday really our high CNS data to prepare us for game day? And so the big thing that the GPS units can track is your player load, is what it's called. And so it takes into account basically every metric that the units can track. So it's going to look at all those things I just mentioned, right? The distance, the high speed yardage, like over 80 and 90% of your max velocity, like how many yards are you at that sprint speed, total accelerations and decelerations, and the speed at which that those things are happening. So it takes all those things into account and basically will spit out how difficult was the practice, right? And the lower the number, the easier, and the higher, the more difficult. Our big wide receiver, that's 6'3", 200 pounds, that can run 23 miles an hour, that plays wide receiver and safety. His highest game day load was 300. And for our offensive linemen that just play on O&D line, their highest game day was like 25. So you get this really big range, but then you can kind of average out what the team averages on the game day. And so for us, typically it's anywhere from 100 to 125 would be a game day load. Now we're playing a lot of 2.5 quarter games, 3-quarter games at most. So guys are coming out. So our data is maybe a little skewed versus when you play a full 4 quarters of football. It's obviously going to be a little bit higher. And so for me, I want those guys to accumulate Monday through Thursday, roughly what they would hit on a game day for a game day load. Maybe anywhere from 1 to 1.5 times what their game day load is. So for that kid, our wide receiver, whose average was probably about 225 to 250, I would want him to get anywhere from like 250 to 300 accumulated throughout the week, Monday through Thursday. And so then the great part about the Titan GPS is you're able to set those thresholds for each player individually based on what their game day needs are. So it's not a generic number for everybody. You can individualize that for each player, and then I can monitor that through the week. So, right, it's don't burn the steak is the big thing. We want to make sure that those guys are fresh and healthy. And now we can adjust practice volume and intensities for some of those guys if they start to creep up a little bit high as we go through the week prior to Friday, because that's when we start to see injuries happen when we overcook kids throughout the course.
Are you in agreement that player load, and by load I'm talking about volume, the volume of accelerations and decelerations and high speed stuff, and the volume of everything they're doing, all movements, that in programs that lose a lot of athletes to injury, that it's probably a load problem?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably number one for sure, because we still practice with great intensity. Everything that
maybe even argue even better intensity because your practices are choppier.
100% better because they're choppier. We provide adequate rest and recovery between reps, between group sessions and indie sessions and team sessions. And so guys know then they're going to have limited opportunities, right? Because the load is small. They're not going to go get to redo something 5 different times. They get one chance at it. And so it better be really good. So we practice with high intensity and high intent with everything that we do. And like you said, better with this approach than what a typical would be, because the volume, the load is too high, and it's just not humanly possible for a kid to practice the way they should with that much load or that much volume.
Describe we need to say too that load is a part of it, and I think that we would both nod yes. That
capacity wise, like there is certain thresholds that players need to be prepared for physically for a football game, 100%.
But we also are huge into RPR as well.
Yes. And making sure that things are turned on and performing the way they should. And then that is, I'd say between RPR, right, and then load management with stuff is keeping those guys performing the way they should to stay healthy.
So load, reflexive performance reset, and if you throw a third thing in, maybe number of collisions?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I think because there's a difference between, and this was something we learned our first year, like when we talk about a low CNS day, there's a difference between like low CNS and like low contact. Like you could run a team session for an offense and defensive lineman and be very high contact, but their CNS load would not be that high because they're not getting up above 10 miles per hour. They're playing in a small 5x5 yard square box. And so that's not going to spit out a super high GPS load, even though the contact would be high, versus, say, a wide receiver that's only wearing a helmet and has virtually no contact in practice, but they do a 10-minute one-on-one versus a DB session, and then going into another 10-minute 7-on-7 session where they're running high distance, high speeds. That's going to be a super high CNS load on those bodies, even though the contact is not very high. And so that was something that we had to evaluate a little bit, and something that we learned through collecting data with our GPS units is matching up a low contact with a low CNS day. We were doing one-on-ones with just helmets on our Tuesday practice when we're a low contact, but that was a high CNS load for kids. And so we learned that by using our Titan GPSs. So we moved those to Wednesdays to stack that stress on that day, and we replaced it with something from a lower CNS standpoint to make sure that we were setting up that high practice on a Wednesday with a low day on a Tuesday.
When we're talking about kids staying healthy, I look back, even though it was almost 50 years ago, I guess it was 50 years ago, in my last football game, I had my uniform cut off of me. It was a shoulder injury. Yeah. Third play of the fourth game. And I had no idea that would be the end of my quarterback career and stuff. So, and I look back at that team, and there were probably 8 other guys that had season-ending injuries in the first half of the season. And so I'm pretty sensitive about that, you know, and I watched my own sons have a lot of injuries, and they were all victims of old school coaching, huge loads and all that kind of stuff. And the idea, I see you shake your head. It's almost like it hurts us to hear about kids whose career was cut short because of maybe just dumb coaching, just what we did to people. 2 years ago, did you have an entire roster play the championship game, or were you missing one guy?
2023, we had a full roster, everyone healthy all year long. Every kid stepped on the field in that state championship game.
There wasn't like one kid in like jeans and a uniform on crutches.
Everyone,
not a single kid.
Not a single kid.
14 games.
Everyone got in the field for 14 games, right? It's not just a regular season. We're talking a 14-game season.
With lots of violence, and you played the final game where the Vikings play.
Yes, at
right?
US Bank Stadium. Yeah, semifinal and finals. It was great.
Oh,
what an experience, right? For a kid to end their career that way.
So were you just lucky that year, or did you have a similar record this year?
No, that was consistent. So even going back to 21 and 22, 2021, 2022, we didn't win our last game either of those years, but we had every kid healthy playing in the last game of both of those seasons. Same thing in 2023. And then this year, 2024, we had our first season-ending injury since we started our sprint-based football Feed the Cats approach in 2019. And so we lost a kid to a knee injury, to an ACL, the week before, or the day before our first round of playoffs. And it is the most gutting feeling in the world, because you see how much, as we've all been through it, right, as athletes, and we know how important it is to us. But I think in our program anyway, how much the players and the coaches care about what we do and care about each other. That is the worst feeling in the world, for a kid to have to finish his career on a sidelines and not be able to go play for all the things that they poured into themselves and the program. It's the worst. The thing that I think that keeps me up probably the most, and I worry the most about in season, is you don't want to lose a kid. And fortunately, because of that kid's everything else was so strong about his knee, we were able to, he pushed out, he didn't have surgery. We were able to get him on the field for a kneel down in the state championship game. We got him dressed and he wore his stuff. So we still didn't have a kid on crutches or in jeans in the state championship game. And when we took care of business and we were up 43 to whatever it was at that point, and we were able to put him out at quarterback and direct snap, and he took a knee and got to end his career on the field. So that was a really special moment for me to give him that opportunity after having lost him, a senior, a couple weeks earlier.
Yeah, it makes me pretty damn emotional to even hear that. My last question, I've got to meet your assistant coaches at track football consortiums, and we've talked about healthy athletes. It seems like you have a healthy coaching staff as well. Can you tell me what sprint-based football does to coaches?
It reinvigorates your excitement for what you do and your passion for coaching kids and watching them go compete and be successful. It's a pretty unique group of guys, and I'm very blessed and fortunate to have brought in really good people first, and a lot of them were good football coaches. I think they've become great football coaches over the year because they have committed to doing whatever they need to do to create a great experience for the kids. And it's important, it's the feedback loop, right? With Feed the Cats, like it is infinitely important to them to create a great experience for the kids because they want to see them be successful because the kids are enjoying so much what they're doing and they see how much they pour into getting better and improving. So really for each other, right? Our coaches are doing everything they can to put players in a position to be successful. And I think because of that experience and the culture that we've built in our program with that, not only is it the best part of our kids' day, it's the best part of our coaches' day to come be together with most of those guys are my best friends. And we get to go hang out for 2 hours together every single day and coach the sport that we love. And it's a great experience for us. And we try to do our best then to manage the home with all that stuff. I just turned 40 and I'm like the third oldest on staff. It's a younger group of guys that I work with and they all have young families. And so we try to do as much as we can to help balance the demand of the season. And I don't know that you ever find a complete balance, but at least I think we do as good a job as anyone, giving them the opportunity to still be good dads and good husbands and be great football coaches at the same time.
You may move on to bigger and better things someday, but I don't think you'll ever have a better staff.
No. And that's the thing is you think about, I get people that ask me questions all the time. Oh, would you be interested in, would you go up and coach at college level or things like that? And I would always entertain an opportunity and things like that, but I don't know that I could build the same staff that we've done here. And it's just such a unique opportunity that we have. That would be the hardest probably to leave would be the staff and the people that we've created here, because I don't know that we could replicate that anywhere else. Well, Garrett, you've been great and we could talk forever. We'll probably have to have a round two, kind of like I said with Brad, because we could talk. Yeah, I'm supposed to keep these to like 30 minutes, and we've gone overtime a little bit. Okay, well, it's all right.
But it's okay.
It's all good.
But I do want to mention that people can learn more about this stuff by going to Track Football Consortiums. We're having a sprint-based football clinic at Saraland, Alabama, just north of Mobile. John Herschel at Saraland is hosting it for us, and that's going to be great. And then we're having one in Nashville, actually at Ravenwood High School, being hosted by Dan Quisenberry, and just an outstanding clinic. I believe if you go to one of these things, it's kind of life-changing for a football coach. So those things, but also I want to credit you because I've just heard so many people talk about how giving you've been with them. Like coaches that might beat your ass someday in the playoffs. Well, you're teaching them how to do it.
Yeah, well, my dad's the one that's worried the most about it because we hosted like kind of a little mini clinic here in Stewartville last year for the state of Minnesota, and you look around, it's like, oh yeah, that guy, we might play that guy, we might play that. Well, and so I mentioned it to you, the team that we played in the state championship game this year was at our clinic, and I think ultimately, again, I'm only implementing the stuff that I've stolen from you and from Brad and other people, right? That's kind of the community that we've created, and so I think if we can go help impact as many kids as possible across the country, it's infinitely more important than winning and losing a football game. But yeah.
The kids and the coaches. And I think, it makes such a difference in the school. It makes such a difference in the community. Yeah, I could get I get pretty enthusiastic about this stuff because it's just win-win. It's not just the 28 straight. By the way, 14-0 next year too?
I mean, 1-0. We'll focus on one game at a time there. But no, we're excited for the group we got coming back.
I hear that you have a big sign above your desk saying like Steve Jones ain't crap. Like that 70 wins in a row is nothing.
We're coming for it.
We're coming for it. We're coming for you, Steve Jones.
That's
right. Of course, I hope that Steve listens to this and gets a chuckle out of it. But he had a huge impact on both of us.
He did.
And will always, the author of course, The Twin Thieves, 70 consecutive wins, 5 straight 14-0 seasons. And no matter what happens, I think it's going to be a fun year for you next year and the next because, man, you got kids. I keep asking questions. Are you dipping down Are you hitting kids before they're in high school?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's probably a whole nother podcast. Like we have, Alan May, who you would have met at TFC, he's our intermediate 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade Phi Ed teacher, and he's my special teams coordinator and does receivers and safeties. So he has Fast Fridays. So every Friday we get the free lap out, and he's got up on a big projector on the wall in the gym, and those guys are running, those 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are running fly 10s, in the gym one day a week, and they get speeding tickets that they put up at school. If they hit like, I think it's 14, 15, 16 miles an hour or something like that. We run a summer youth speed and athletic development camp 2 days a week, and that's 3rd through 6th grade. So we got those kids twice a week that are sprinting. And so we're dipping, all the way down to like 8, 9, 10-year-olds is where they're starting to sprint in Stewartville. And then by the time they get up to us in high school, makes our job easy.
Yeah, it's really not fair. And Alan does such a good job. I remember seeing one of the clips on Twitter. Wasn't he like running in the dark one time?
Yeah, he did. He's just so great about, creating a cool experience for kids. So we did a glow in the dark fly 10s. And so we had a bunch of like neon lights and a black light up, and then along the runway that they had to run through when they got their time. And then the lights were off in the gym, so it was projected up on the wall. And kids they'll always remember that, right? And we talk about making it the best part of their day and a great experience. Those kids are fired up about running fast. So, no, it's a great mix that we got.
Well, I'm your biggest fan. I absolutely love the broadcasts of the state championship games and stuff. I got to watch that. I think I was watching like Brad Dixon on my computer and you on my phone, and it's just so much fun for me in the fourth quarter of my life, getting to live vicariously through you guys. And we'll have you on again, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you again for listening to the Sprint-based football series on the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Be sure to check out our presenting sponsor, Titan GPS. It's used by Sprint-based football coaches to get better data and understand the player load and how they can adjust that over the course of the season. It'll help you find out a lot about your team. It's used by Garrett Mueller, who's a 2-time state champion at Stewartville High School in Minnesota. He uses it for all kinds of things, like seeing how his team's speed is progressing over the course of the season. I could say that in 2024, they actually got faster over the course of the season following their sprint-based football recipe. Titan Sensors also has the popular truck stick metric designed specifically for football and inspired by sprint-based football. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com. You can get our show notes there. We have articles on these episodes as well. And follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.